go right now to our next presentation, something that is exciting. Dr. Malley with the park. Mrs. Guzzi, Ms. Palmer.
Hi, so, yeah, is it down here? So, once again, we're presenting our academic state of the district, and this is something that we've done annually. We've done it since my first year in Norwich. And there's a little bit of statistical information that's provided that is easily accessible through the Illinois State Report Card, the e-report card, if you will, as well as we've added the park documents, or our park information as well for this past year. And as a reminder, our park score is always belated. Even though we took it in the previous year, we get the information in October, November, and we really literally have to make adjustments. If we're going to make adjustments, we'd have to make them in the year as opposed to prior to the year, which would be far more beneficial. But with that being said, we have our enrollment for 5 years, and it's pretty stable. In 2015, 2016, we did enrollment projections. We did not invest in enrollment projections because we feel that we're at a time that we're not seeing big fluctuations in our student population. Again, it's remaining relatively stable. And we have the grade centers, which is actually for the benefit of the school. So if we had an increase of our elementary kids, we can accommodate them because we have literally an entire LRC that is empty. And the same could be said for Giles. We have 3 classrooms that are vacant, and so we could accommodate if we had an increase in the number of students. Our low income has had a little bit of a increase in 2014-15, and that had to do with reporting that was provided by the Illinois State Board of Education. And so there was a change in the actual reporting, where in the past they included certain numbers under, I believe it's DHS report. DHS report, is that correct? I believe it's a DHS report, and that's no longer the case. And so it's being reported at a local level. But if you take the 2013, 16, and 17, we're pretty stable in the number of low-income kids. And this affects us in our actual formula, because our formula has a number of tiers where the students are funded at certain levels. And we fall into the second tier of a 4-tier system, and the second tier is much lesser than the 3rd or 4th tier. EL is pretty stable, but I will share this with you that we've had a larger number of students that according to our home language survey, that are speaking Ukrainian as well as, I believe it's Arabic. And so over the next few years, we're going to have to decide whether or not we're going to add for those ELL services. So you know, when you have 20 students that are recognized in the home language in a certain area, you have to provide a teacher that speaks that language as well. And so to give you an example, we had 20 kids that were recognized under speaking Polish, and therefore we had to provide a Polish-speaking EL teacher. And so we can anticipate for the next 2 years, we're just at the cusp. We're at about 19 students in Ukrainian, about 18 students in Arabic, and so there's a good chance that we're going to have to add an Arabic-speaking teacher for EL as well as Ukrainian. So I want to keep that in mind, and that's something for the board to know too. Our attendance is stable at about 95%. In my opinion, that's low. We should be at about 96 or 97%. However, it's stable. It's stable, and this has been congruent year over year over year. And so we can't force the parents to bring their kids in school. But one thing we do want to visit in the future is having high attendance months or encouraging students to attend on certain months of the school, because that directly affects our revenue as well with the new state formula. Administrator pupil ratio. As you can see, we have one of the lowest. We have the lowest number of administrators per pupil And I think this is something that speaks to the board. The board does not believe in having layers. They believe in having people that are at the top and investing the rest of the money into the classroom. That's just been the philosophy here since I've been here and prior to me being here. If you go to other districts, they may have assistant principals. We've basically foregone the assistant principal position. What we've done instead is we've invested in our people and we've provided a stipend. For example, last year we started the role of a principal being the assistant superintendent of curriculum instruction. We've continued that, and the following year, once certification is acquired, we're going to look to extending that to our other principal. But again, we believe that we have a number of positions at the top, and then all the money goes into the class, all the money that we have. Our pupil-teacher ratio is pretty constant. We are slightly lower than the state average, which is something to be proud of. But keep in mind, there's a difference, because what the board was talking here is you have the average class size with the general education teacher. This includes all of our teachers. So it takes all of our students, divides it by all of our teachers, including EL teachers, special education teachers, EC teachers, etc. So keep in mind, this is looking at the whole picture, not classroom by classroom or in the buildings. And then the instructional expense per pupil, we're slightly lower than the state average. This is just the education fund, so this does not include the operation and maintenance or the transportation, which you'll see on another slide, which is $10,256. And keep in mind, our AFR was just approved, which means this number was just updated. For 2017, the operating expense per pupil actually fell to about $9,500. 9,000, yeah. So we had a decrease, and that's because we reduced our expenses by $750,000. Okay, so there's consistency. Expenditures compared to revenue by fiscal year. So once again, we've done a good job of stabilizing it over a number of years. But this is what I spoke to in just a moment ago. If you look at 2008, this is where our expenditures started to exceed our revenues. And so this, the problem you have today didn't necessarily start overnight. It was something that perpetuated over time, and it started well before the board was actually seated, any of the board members at this current time. Our administrative salaries are higher than the state average. Again, we don't have additional administrators at the lower rungs of the ladder. And keep in mind, it's been pretty steady over certain years. So if you look at 2010, 2011, it's comparable to 2016, 2017. And then teachers employed in the district, in 2016, 2017, we've been at 8,879. The staffing for this year is less, as was expected. And if the board continues with the plan moving forward, it's going to be even lesser in the following year. And then our teacher salaries are slightly greater than the state average. And that's been that way since about 2012, and since 2011. And that coincides with the revenues and expenditures, which of course we want to invest in our teachers. They have the greatest impact on our students in the classroom. And then our classroom size, compared to the state average, is about 22.7, so we're actually higher. Okay. And now we're going to get into the park. And there's two things. Number one, there's the park that Michelle and Mrs. Guzik and Mrs. Palmer are going to present. Principal Palmer and Principal Guzik are going to present. But one of the things that I found interesting is the state brought this to our attention that there are third parties that do a analysis of the actual assessments that we're using. And one of the things that they compare to is the Smarter Balance, which is another assessment similar to the park. And the findings of this research group, which is a non-for-profit, are showing that the park has very high standards. And that's a good thing. So the reason I say that is we're being held to a higher standard with the park. And there's people in my life or colleagues of mine that believe that the park is going away. I personally don't think it's going away. I think that the park is going to get better and better at measuring exactly what it's expected to do, and that is growth. Do I agree that the state should apply it once a year? No, I don't. I think it's an assessment that should be twice a year because we're going to get a better measure over time. However, since it's here to stay, once a year suffice as long as it's doing what it's expected to do. But as I tell people, it takes time for an assessment to become reliable and valid. Reliable and valid. Just because an assessment is valid doesn't mean it's reliable. If it's reliable, it will be valid. And so for our purposes, it's becoming better and better at doing exactly what it's expected to do, and that is measuring growth. And so with that being said, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but the study it's pretty compelling. I mean, it's really positive because I think our state legislators picked a good assessment to use. The question is, are we going to tweak the bid specifications? Are we going to tweak the expectations as a whole so that we can get a better measure of our students in the classroom? And in a later slide, I'll explain why that actually is going to be applicable. So at this point in time,
Well, basically this slide talks about how PARC is an assessment of Common Core standards in many states. Some states went with PARC, some states, like Dr. O'Malley said, went with Smarter Balance. And we needed a state test that measured how our students are doing with these new standards. And that's where this slide basically outlines what states are in our category. It is given online, and it is here in the elementary world, as I'm getting to know, a multi-day experience for your students in the spring.
So PARC is in its third year. We have 3 years of taking PARC, so when you look at that data, and as Dr. O'Malley mentioned about looking at the reliability and the validity of the assessment, keep in mind we're in 3 years when we're looking at it. And they're always changing it and tweaking. It's not the same test that they're taking year after year. Things are always updated. And it's a test that's taken in 3rd through 8th grade. So here at Lee, we'll be taking it in 3rd and 4th grade. And it's typically done with like a total shutdown of the school, like everyone
Stop, drop, and park.
stops and parks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't have like kids in the hallway. We don't have anything going on where anyone can be distracted. And then next year at Giles will be 1st, 5th, through 8th grade.
Middle school. Correct.
There is, it's ELA and math, 3 to 4 tests of ELA, 3 to 4 tests of math, depending on grade level. And then there is a science 5th grade and 8th grade assessment, which we have never gotten results back on, by the way. The state has never shared that with us.
They're getting there.
Perhaps. We'll see. Would be nice. So here are our 2017 PARC scores. And I know, again, Dr. Schilligan earlier is very small. But basically, if you look at,
We're actually number 2, second in the list for composite scores. If you average them
like
together.
this light gray color here, if you want to call it that color, so you can kind of see where we are compared to other districts that are in our.
We're about 0.5% behind Union Ridge, and Union Ridge is a much smaller school. So an interesting comparison, but nevertheless, some of our neighboring schools, and personally, here's the state average, which is 34.2. We're up at 47.3. However, when you break that out, you can take a look at ELA. We remain number 2 on this list. And then when you go to math, we drop to 5th rank.
ELA is 55.7%. So that's how many percent of kids who met or exceeded. And then on math, and this is Giles and Lee combined together. 38.8.
Which is for a 5th rank. Yeah, so I'll be your fan.
Okay. So here's where we get down to the nitty-gritty of looking at the state, where Norwich is, and then it breaks apart between Giles and Lee.